Adjunct Professor Moran, Microeconomics 112. In our few remaining sessions together, we're going to discuss why government exists. We're going to take this from an economic point of view, not a political science point of view. And governments will exist when there is something called market failure. So that happens for a few reasons. Why aren't all goods and services produced by private firms? Why isn't pure capitalism the way to go, where there is a negligible role for the government? One reason exists because private industry will refuse to provide some goods and services. This will result because if a business provides some services and that service can be shared among other people, and once it's provided, you can't exclude it from people who don't pay, well then, those people who aren't paying, called free riders, they're getting a benefit for something they don't pay for, and the businessman would be entitled to that, and so he will not provide that service, and government will need to provide those services as a result. We'll go into more detail. Another reason that government exists from an economic point of view is something called externalities. To an economist, a business provides services and a consumer buys them, and all the benefits from buying that good or service should accrue to the purchaser, and all the profits or losses should accrue to the seller. A buyer or seller, supply and demand. But occasionally there are benefits or costs that accrue to someone that was not part of the transaction. Pollution, for example. Herd immunization, immunity, for example, when it comes to disease. And so the government's role would be to stuff those costs and benefits back into the cost of the transaction, restoring the market to equilibrium. Finally, if we've decided the government needs to exist, we need to discuss taxation, how to pay for government. And those will be the three topics we discuss in this unit on the role of government. Government and market failure. Market failure happens when there are spillovers, or also known as externalities, accrue. There is either a benefit or a cost accruing to someone who is not part of the transaction. Pollution, for example. Someone may buy cheap coal and get the benefit of cheap coal, and the seller will get the profit from selling cheap coal, but the pollution from cheap coal may cause health problems for someone that did not get the benefit of the cheap coal. Also, governments will exist for a category of goods sold called public goods. And public goods are those that fail to allocate resources to the production of goods and services to output that is economically justified. In other words, there are some goods for which businesses will not produce because they don't get the benefit of producing them from the number of people consuming them. Let's talk about public and private goods first. A public good is generally produced in large quantities and can't be sold to an individual. In other words, once it's produced, many people can consume it. That's called shared consumption. It's not divisible. More than one person can consume it at once. Like college, national defense, spraying for mosquitoes, street lights, fire and police protection. Shared consumption. Provided for one, it's provided for many people. Consumption cannot be excluded. So if you don't pay, you can still get it. Once it's provided, whether you pay or not, you get the benefit from it. Private goods, pure private goods. So these goods will be provided 100% by the government, none by private industry. Pure private goods are goods that can be produced in small enough units where they can be sold to an individual consumer. And if someone doesn't, that's not shared consumption. And if you don't pay, you can be excluded from the transaction. So what's going to divide pure public goods from pure private goods are whether the consumption can be shared or not, and whether someone can be excluded if they don't pay. So we'll have pure private goods provided by business only, pure public goods only provided by the government, and then a mixed category. What's going to distinguish these is whether consumption can be shared and whether someone can be excluded if they don't pay. Exclusion principle. People who pay for a product may buy it and enjoy it. Others are excluded from the benefits. You buy a steak, you eat it, no one else can eat that steak. Right. Public goods have no way to exclude those who don't pay from it. This is like public art. War memorial statues placed in public areas consumers can't be excluded from consuming that good because it's out in the open. Free riders are people who don't pay for the enjoyment of a good. Since a producer can't force people to pay, market demand would be understated, and the government will have to produce these goods. Okay. So let's take a look at this. A pure public good is one for which consumption is shared, and once it's produced, you can't exclude somebody from consuming it. Examples of national defense. If one person pays for national defense, okay, consumption can be shared because the neighbor will automatically also be provided with protection on national defense. And you can't exclude that person. Police and fire. Streetlights. Once you put up streetlights, consumption of the benefit of streetlights is shared, but you can't exclude somebody from it.